Public Enterprises Minister Pravin Gordhan yesterday announced the restructure of SAA, saying it would ensure the national carrier's financial operational sustainability. For more on this story, we have political analyst Khaya Sithole on the line. A very good morning to you, Khaya. Is SAA a vanity project for the government?
It's starting to look like it. Good morning to the listeners, but I think the problem we have with SAA is the government seems to be struggling to actually put together a cogent business case for why it should be treated one way or another, whether they want to keep it viable and how they plan to do so, or whether they want to shut it down, as the finance minister has said, and what the plan around that is. So it seems to be that confusion around the status of SAA and particularly what the country wishes to do with it that is creating this type of chaos.
Minister Gordhan insisting that it remains a going concern. Your thoughts on this?
He is actually not speaking the truth. I have seen the draft financial statements of SAA for the past 2 years. It is not a going concern. And the reason it is not a going concern is that any company whose liabilities exceed its assets is by definition not a going concern. And of course, the reason the financial statements have not been tabled in Parliament is that the auditors have to sign off that they agree with the company managers that the company is indeed a going concern. And unfortunately, they are unable to reach that decision in the absence of a commitment from National Treasury to bail out SAA. So the Minister of Public Enterprises saying that SAA is a going concern is quite simply a lie.
So when a government has given commitment that they're going ahead with the carrier, where to from here?
Look, when they say that they're going ahead with keeping the carrier alive, it means they will now obviously have to make all the commitments and obligations associated with that decision. It means that the loans that are due to be repaid will have to be paid by the state. It means that whatever contracts need to be renegotiated will then have to be negotiated, and the country will have to fund that. So when you read in between the lines, it simply means we've decided that it must carry on, and of course, the only way it can carry on is if it has access to more money. And if it cannot have access to more money from the banks as it is, because they've exhausted their borrowing capacity, and the only way the banks can give it an additional cent is if the taxpayer puts up their hand and say, yes, we will guarantee that additional cent that you're giving to SAA. So it really means that you actually will be giving it more money.
Another commitment they will have to meet is that of giving workers an increase by February next year. Are they going to be able to meet this agreement, this commitment?
Well, the problem with making such commitments without explaining where the money is going to come from is that you create anxieties from the people who actually are expecting that particular increase, because they are the same people who then hear that actually we don't even have money to pay full salaries this month. So it becomes a question to them of, well, where are you going to be able to fund this additional payment from if you're not in a position to actually even guarantee what we're entitled to at this stage? So I think what happens is that they say such things in order to obviously get away from the strike action, in order to get everybody back into the workplace. But I think the reality is that they still have no idea where any of the solutions are going to come from.
So in the introduction of the restructuring process yesterday, the minister urged South Africans to support SAA in terms of increasing sales. But it has been said that sales are not the problem at SAA. It's the corruption and the bad leadership. What are your thoughts in terms of this?
Look, exactly 2 years ago, SAA actually hired a restructuring officer, and that was Peter Davis. So he was based in the United Kingdom, and he was actually trying to help them turn around to profitability. That was 2 years ago. And then after they hired a CEO who also had the mandate to turn the airline around. So the statement yesterday that says that now we're going to restructure is actually a repetition of what we've heard before. So the question that I would expect for people to ask the minister is to say, well, actually this has been said 2 years ago. There was a restructuring officer. That restructuring officer actually left a couple of months ago. What exactly do you mean that you're going to restructure now? And what does that mean for the status of the airline as it is? Are you going to change the way it's structured? And when you do so, what goes and what stays? So the problem we have with people issuing late-night press statements is that we're not in a position to interrogate the substance of what they're saying. So for me, I didn't learn much from the statement that was issued yesterday, except it was a lot of political speak that actually doesn't tell us what happens next.
This restructuring might be at SAA, but it speaks to the general situation in South Africa, especially with state-owned organizations. Case in point, Eskom also getting a restructuring official in the form of Mr. Freeman. How much influence will these restructuring bodies have in terms of making decisive decisions?
Absolutely zero. And the reason that they've got zero influence is that what the politicians have strategically done is failed to actually define what the role of a restructuring officer is and where they stand in relation to the board, the shareholder, and the CEOs of these particular entities. So in that vacuum of accountability, it simply means that a restructuring officer comes up with an idea, they put it on the table, and if the people around the table do not like that idea, well, then it never sees the light of day. So I think it's been a strategic exercise by them to completely deny us access into really what the expectations of these restructuring officers are, what their terms of reference are, so that nobody can actually hold them to account. So if the chief restructuring officer says, I couldn't be able to do this, the CEO will be like, well, there were reasons we couldn't do it. The shareholder will say something else, and then the board will say something completely different. So it's that vacuum of accountability that has been created. And unfortunately, when you look at the state of these public enterprises, it really started off there when the accountability pool, when the accountability instruments were undermined one way or another. And this is what has led us to where we are right now.
What does this lack of transparency do for business confidence?
None whatsoever. I personally would hesitate to buy an airline ticket for the next 3 or 4 months when I actually don't even know what the restructuring process might entail. The restructuring process might simply mean that they decide to cancel the regional connections. It might mean that they're going to cut down on the domestic flights. The problem with leaving it in such an opaque and an intransparent manner is that it means people are going to be gambling if they decide to actually buy this ticket. So people are going to hold back and say, until we know exactly what this statement means, until we know exactly what the status of the airline is going to be in 3 or 6 months' time, we're better off taking our chances with other airlines. So when the minister said that, we need to help the airlines restore confidence by buying tickets, we don't buy tickets in order for anyone to have confidence. We buy tickets because we want to fly somewhere. And all we need is a guarantee that we'll be able to fly to those places. And you are unable to provide that in yesterday's statement.
So if you were to have a chat with Labour, NUMSA or SACA, about their prospects at SAA in the short-term future, what would you say?
Well, the first question that they would have to ask the people that run SAA is, do we have the appropriate workforce for the type of operation that you want to run? And what exactly do you think needs to be done to the workforce if the answer is perhaps the right balance is not there? And I think the reality here is that at some point in time, even the unions are going to have to make peace with the fact that the airline has been so badly mismanaged, there are going to be consequences across the board. So there will be consequences at management level, and unfortunately there will also be consequences at the employment level. It's now a question of just how do you manage that process, because if you look at the way the airline is currently working, it is simply unable to pay its own costs. And if it's unable to pay its own costs, the inevitable outcome is that it will eventually have to close down as soon as the taxpayers decide that enough is enough. So it is in the interest of everybody to get around the table now and sort of try and work out the possibilities that might actually have to materialize, whatever the best case scenario is, that creates the least damage across all stakeholders. But to think that nothing is going to happen to the workforce is actually just simply no longer practical.
AfriForum is proposing business rescue. In your opinion, what are the viable solutions?
Well, the problem with business rescue is that it is seen as a last resort, but there are advantages associated with business rescue. And those advantages is that absolutely everything that has been signed is then open to renegotiation, it's open to cancellation if need be. So a lot of people always complain that there are these long-term contracts that the state-owned enterprises cannot get out of. But under business rescue, well, you simply have to say, we've decided that this contract is no longer viable, and you're able to cancel it. So that's the one benefit of business rescue, in that everybody is then forced to sit around the table and come up with a solution in the shortest time frame possible. Now, there's always going to be hesitation around the business rescue process, particularly because of the optics of it. It looks bad, and unfortunately also there are some loan agreements that are premised on the basis that you're operating as a going concern. So as soon as you go into a restructuring process, some of those are immediately going to be repaid or going to be due. So it creates additional domino effects throughout the system that perhaps the politicians are not ready to stomach as yet.
We're already into the second day of December, Khaya, and there's that looming announcement by ratings agencies in the new year. How does the SAA narrative speak to the problem of the concern about what rating agencies will do about South Africa's economic standing?
Well, the great irony, of course, is that SAA is not as big, an elephant as ESCOM. So I think even when somebody says, okay, we're taking a gamble, we're either shutting down SAA or we're bailing it out, the impact on the fiscus is not as dire as it would be if we were talking about ESCOM. Now, of course, SAA also represents what really the general state of public enterprises is. So even if you think it's a smaller enterprise, you want to be able to sort of set the precedent of saying, okay, this is how we're dealing with all of them, so that at least people have an understanding of what to expect going forward. But now, if we can't even deal with a small elephant in the room like SAA, you can imagine what the conversation will be when something eventually has to be done about ESCOM. So it's not helping the country, this inability for anyone to make a decision one way or another, this tendency of issuing what is really quite a meaningless press statement talking about radical restructuring. We have absolutely no idea what that term means. And when you keep doing things like that, it means that the ratings agencies are eventually going to say, actually, we don't seem to understand what is going on here, so therefore let us just simply retreat and not give you this upgrade in the ratings that you're hoping to get.
You have some level of knowledge in terms of the ability of, or rather the presence of skills in South Africa. There has been talk about how Vuyani Jagana was the right person for the job, and he was taken out unceremoniously. Who for you is the right person to step into the SAA and bring about change and turn around the airline?
At this stage, the right person is not necessarily the one with the right or with the best skills, but rather the one who's brave enough to actually walk into an environment where we know that the political interference, particularly by the Department of Public Enterprises, has become so entrenched it is difficult for anyone to do their job. I think we will not forget what Vuyani actually said in his own resignation letter, in that once you're in there, you are so hamstrung by all these multiple accountability structures, this lack of flexibility and strategic, oversight, in that it makes that job impossible to do. So I think there's a lot of South Africans that have the skills to do this job, but whether any of them are willing to actually do it under the prevailing conditions, where there's far too many politicians sitting in the boardroom who have absolutely no idea how to run any business, let alone an international airline, that for me is the bigger problem. So we don't have a skills deficit. We probably have a lack of courage and perhaps a lack of bravery for someone to actually go out and say, I will do this in spite of the limitations that I already know exist.
Khaya Sithole, thanks for your time this morning.
Thank you.